Welcome to All Things Nonlinear Dynamical. Talks about the brain and human connection. This show tackles the big questions: overcoming challenges, mental well-being, the power of music and literature, and even cutting-edge brain training tech. Join Craig de Servidor and his special and amazing guests as they explore the physical and mental landscapes that make us who we are, offering practical tools and broad perspectives to help you navigate your own unique journey. It's going to get weird, it's going to get wonderful, so buckle up and get ready to explore the incredible world within. This episode's very special guest is a mental health rock star joining us tonight. Joshua Moore isn't your average therapist. This former Army medic, huge thanks for your service, Joshua, uses a powerful toolbox that includes talk therapy, EMDR, family therapy, and the cutting-edge world of neurofeedback to tackle some of life's toughest challenges. We're talking dissociative identity disorder, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. You name it, Joshua's seen it and helped people overcome it. He's even written a fantastic book, Neurofeedback for All, A Beginner's Introduction, to empower everyone to learn more about this fascinating approach to brain health. Joshua, we're excited to welcome to the show, where we get to dive into your world and learn how you're helping people heal and reclaim their lives and so much more.
Well, that's quite an intro, and welcome everyone, and welcome to you, the rock star, Joshua
Well, thank you for
Moore.
having me.
I'm tickled pink to have you. You're quite welcome. I just wanted to go in briefly to how we met. And in July 2020, you joined two of our Facebook groups, and I was delighted to see you come in, and very, very intrigued about your perspective and your knowledge and your passion and your information. Has been a benefit to all of us. So I want to thank you for that. And I would thank you for being here with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on, and I'm excited to just chat.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. And if I may, people who get into this background, there's a life story. There's a non-linear dynamical journey that brought you to this place. Could you give us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it sometimes I don't know where to start, because it can go back as far as being born with, developmental issues and getting like 15 diagnoses before the age of 10.
Oh my.
Starting with failure to thrive as an infant, which is an actual diagnosis apparently. Being told that I would never learn to read. I'm not joking.
Really?
I think the latest doctor to say that. Yeah,
oh my
yeah,
goodness.
absolutely. Yeah, I think the last time I heard that was when I was 7. Hearing my parents being told I would not learn to read. And my parents did a lot of things right. They really did. They showered me with praise anytime there was genuine effort. And they shielded me from, overt, unnecessary, useless criticism, which there would be more than enough to go around had they not.
Right. Oh my.
And, as we just kind of walked life, some things sorted themselves out in unique and surprising ways. And quite unexpectedly, despite everything, despite maybe all the statistics or the expectations. And you can fast forward, and you're getting into like college age, and I'm doing well. I was a high school dropout who went and became tinkerer and mechanic of small things. I fixed sewing machines, and slowly finished high school my own way, and then started doing college in my own way slowly. And all of a sudden it was, we don't know the rules with this kid anymore. What's going on with him?
Wow. Right.
Yeah, and I always, beat to my own drum, as they say. There was several other chapters of my life. I went and got a theology degree from a university, Multnomah University. I got a master's degree from the same university and taught for a while as well. I joined the military and was an orthopedic medic and a combat medic and a healthcare specialist.
Wow.
And in that job, I did the life flights at Walter Reed. So my job was mass casualty triage. I was a drug and alcohol counselor around the same time. It was actually, being in the Army Reserves was my way of surviving on a drug and alcohol counselor salary. So it's like, your $10 an hour doesn't go very far.
You're not getting paid enough for that. That's for sure.
I loved both jobs. I did not love the bureaucracy of the military, as I'm
Sure.
sure being a military brat, you might have some experience in.
Yeah.
But everything I picked up something new and ordered some part of my life that had not been previously ordered at all. And
Fascinating.
it just never quite stopped. It was just one more thing would get sorted, one more thing would get kind of aligned, if you will. And does it match, everything else? Like, no,
Right.
but it works for me. I've got a wife of 15 years coming up this April, and a 10-year-old
Congratulations.
kid, and
Yeah.
8-year-old kid, and a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old kid. I got a
Wow.
family and a small farm, and a few small startup businesses that are doing well, and 6 employees. And that's just a slow growth from no expectation to, my late 30s.
Wow.
And I say that with a lot of gratitude, to be clear. Like I feel grateful for that transition, for that order, and for all the opportunities that I've gotten, and I don't take it for granted.
That,
I enjoy the people around me, and I don't know what's going to happen next year. It's definitely an interesting adventure.
it's nonlinear dynamical, right?
Yeah, right, right. One thing that's consistent is the growth, or the growth of change, or the change, or the consistency of growth, and the consistency of how life orders around me. Um, and again, I can't see much beyond 6 months, and never have been able to. So I guarantee you in a
Understood.
year it'll be way more interesting than my imagination.
I can understand and I can
Mhm,
relate to you. I've had an
mhm,
interesting career.
mhm,
I took a while to get through college. I was
mhm,
going through difficult times and, depression, not really knowing Christ. So this isn't my story, but I'm just relating to yours. And
mhm.
then I got out of college with a degree in biology.
Yeah,
What the heck do I do with that, right?
sure.
So,
Do I
so
teach?
yeah, exactly. I got into the
Mhm.
health department as a trainee in the Registered Environmental Health Specialist program,
Awesome.
became registered here in California.
Hmm.
Enjoyed that career. Moved on to hazmat, certified hazardous materials specialist,
Great.
and I was in charge of what was then called the local enforcement agency
Hmm.
under what was then at that time the California Integrated Waste Management. That's a mouth bureaucratic, but permitting landfills. I got UC
Hmm.
Davis's landfill permitted. I was assisting in that. That took I think 15 or 20 years to get them to get that permit. So that was a big
Uh-huh.
feather. And then I moved on to senior environmental health specialist in charge of the substandard housing program, which
Wow.
was quite a chore and
Hmm.
not going into the very best places. So that was an interesting time for me. And then, because I had connections with the district attorney's office, they opened up a position with special services for environment.
Mm.
And I moved over to that. But I was the Barney Fife, okay, of the DA's office as an investigator. I don't own a gun. I don't want to.
Yeah.
And then the special services branch disbanded, and
Hmm.
teaching was my fallback. Okay, let me go be a substitute teacher and work towards
Hmm.
that. And unfortunately, at the time, the relationship with my then wife and
Hmm.
my daughter, she was fussy. That fell apart. So I needed to make more than $100 a day, if you know what
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean.
I'm well
So
aware of what you're talking about.
yeah, so I went back to the DA's office
Hmm.
as an extra help investigator back in the welfare fraud
Hmm.
scene, which I was not crazy.
Hmm.
But then they moved the office and the IT manager, and we had to move computers and everything. And I was a tinkerer like
Hmm.
you, not
Hmm.
as proficient as you are, but building my own PCs.
Hmm.
And that was one of the reasons the relationship fell apart, because I spent too much time at what was then known as Fry's Electronics.
Oh, I know fries deeply. Yeah.
Yes, you and I, we're copacetic on that one.
Hmm.
And the manager, IT manager, got fed up and left.
Hmm.
So I went up to my boss, the chief investigator, Pete Martin, and his boss, my boss on top of my boss, the chief deputy district attorney, Mark Jones, wonderful people, great friends, and said, "Hey, man, can I get this IT gig?"
Mm-hmm.
So they walked me into Dave Henderson's office, and he was a big barrel man, a grumbly, you know, you couldn't understand what he said, but they talked him into letting me do that. And then I transformed that job into an award-winning IT management. I won 2 county. So, and then I'm not here to brag about myself, but I had a very similar experience with you where I started off not knowing, you know, I mean, in my situation, it was mental health related, not knowing what, you know, where I stood. To every job I found a way to shine. And, you know, now I'm in my retirement gig, you know, I'm kind of a subject matter expert in a different way.
Sure.
And I'm just loving it. And it's like you said, you know, this is a key theme that, you know, so far in my 2 podcasts, and now this one, loving what you do is not a job.
Right.
It's a passion. It's an adventure. It's exciting. So anyway, enough of me. I just wanted to share that with you. And also the tinkering with sewing machines.
Yeah.
My Italian grandmother was a seamstress. She did the embroidery work for the U.S. Army back in the day.
Okay.
And she made my mother's dresses. She made her wedding dress, which was gorgeous. And I never met my grandfather. He passed before I born, but he was a tailor. So, you know, you were probably, you know, I mean, in a different reality, you know, fixing their sewing machines.
Yep. I mean, yeah. I mean, everything kind of leads into each other and connects. I hadn't joined the Army yet, because I joined the Army to survive on the drug and alcohol counselor salary, but or was an hourly thing, you know. But I was sent out to some store because we owned a lease on it and it wasn't going to survive. It didn't have the revenue. It was like, just bleed out the lease and then we'll close it. And they had like 3 years left on it. So me being the cheapest paid technician, and then maybe what I assume was the cheapest paid salesman, were kind of set out there to let it die. And we decided to do this, just like we called it open sewing, which is where people could pay like $3 or $2 or $5, and they can come just sew with all their friends. And then we just like keep the sewing machines running, and it was just a way to keep the place a little busy and maybe make a little bit of money. And it went really well. Like people got really excited about the idea of just sewing with all their friends. And if something went wrong with their machine, some guy would come out from the back and fix it real quick and get it running. You know, that was me. And people get really emotional for understandable reasons if you put yourself in their shoes over their sewing machines. Maybe their kids have moved on and are not nearby, or maybe they're estranged. You know, even if you put a lot of energy and love into a pet, they age faster than you. And so the one thing in your life, like the coping skill that has tested across time, and this like form of identity with the elderly can easily be a sewing machine. So they can get quite upset when it doesn't work. And so I was helping someone and calming them down and fixing it and getting it on the right spot, getting it going again, getting them back into their spot and sewing. And somebody came up to me and gave me their business card, and it's like vice president or something of Morrison Services, which I didn't know at the time, but that's one of the largest mental health conglomerates, you know, in the Northwest or something like that. And she just said, "You're in the wrong job." She said, "Apply for any job that you are minimally qualified for, and I will notice and I will ensure that you get it." So it's just like, I didn't know what this experience meant. So I went to the job applications, looked through, there was seemingly hundreds of them. I found what I felt was the most intense, most interesting job, and it seemed like maybe arguably I was eligible for it. And so I applied, and yes, I got the job very, very quickly. I think it was strange how quickly it went. Like I put it in the mail in the evening, got a call that next morning, had an interview by lunch, and was offered the job, you know, in less than 24 hours from mailing. I didn't know how it went that fast.
Wow.
But that took me down, you know, the rabbit hole of mental health. You know, I fell in love with, you know, working with intense populations.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
21, which is, I think, the youngest you're allowed to work in mental health in Oregon, at least.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've been doing mental health work for 17 years now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And as that tinkerer,
Yeah. Well,
um,
right now I work in neuromodulation, neurotherapy, specifically neurofeedback, and it
uh,
doesn't feel too different. And nor did the military. I was an orthopedic medic, which is bones, muscles, joints, ligaments. Um, it's hard to explain what that job is because it doesn't really exist on the civilian side, but we got to do
yeah,
ridiculously intense things with people's, physical bodies, the mechanics of it. Um, I don't know. It was a blast, and it did feel like the sewing machines led into the orthopedics, and both of those led into neurotherapies like neurofeedback. And there are very few things in life as immensely complicated as the brain,
right.
you know. And I seem to gravitate towards those things partially because I think that contrast of having such little expectation and having what felt like no growth potential, and then
Hmm.
the momentum leaves you with a lack of understanding of where you should go. There's no template for
Right.
you.
Hmm.
And I
You,
don't
you,
mean to sound that as a bad thing. Maybe it was,
no,
but it's not.
but it sounds to me
Mhm.
like you've taken these situations where you didn't have the template and you made your own. You know?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was always easy. In fact,
No.
my adolescence was quite hard and aimless, and aimless is the wrong word. It's more like uh, I acute it to being in the dark.
Yeah.
Um, but nowadays it's more interesting. Like life's more adventurous and more exciting,
Yeah.
and I'm not a pessimist. I'm quite an optimist these days.
Oh, in all the interactions I
Mhm.
see with you people, it shines. It
Mhm.
really shines. I do have a question for you
Yeah, please.
because I'm fascinated by
Mhm.
your work with neuroinflammation and
Sure.
how you see that,
Mhm.
how you're able to determine that, and then kind of,
Yeah.
what is the protocol? What is the way
Yeah.
to treat
Oh
that?
man, if you want to get into the technical stuff, I got so much thoughts
Oh
on this.
yeah,
Now,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
hey,
it should-
but I did read The Angel and
yeah.
the Assassin, so I have a
Oh, okay. So
general sense.
well, that's a pretty good that's a pretty good technical read to give Craig credit for the listeners. If they think, oh, I'll go get a beginner's education, and they pick up The Angel and the Assassin, they're going to be a little bit disappointed. That is
Well,
not a beginner book, Craig.
no, and I'm quite honestly,
Mhm.
it's like me following, my mentor around
Yeah,
Val. Like,
yeah,
what the heck is he talking about? And
yeah,
it cooks in the brain a little bit,
yeah,
like with Bill
yeah.
O'Hanlon and learning,
Mhm.
about Ericksonian hypnosis,
Mhm.
and what he's talking about. It takes me a while,
Yeah, yeah,
but
sure. It takes
if
it
I,
takes time. Mhm.
yeah, I get,
Yeah.
I get that high level, and then I
Yeah.
want to dive deeper. But anyway, enough of me.
So,
Please.
first of all, the disclaimer is worthwhile. I'm willing to speak candidly on a podcast, but in my clinic, I'm never going to use the term neuroinflammation, even
Okay.
though that's exactly what it is oftentimes. The problem is that we don't have a way to kind of bring containment to a phrase like that.
Hmm.
Even if it's technically true, it may not be communicating what we intend to. So, for example, headaches and migraines, like there is increased cytokines in the brain during that process, and you can measure that with spinal taps, and that is inflammatory. Okay, but it's also just a headache. Like at the same
Yeah.
time, it's just a headache.
Yeah.
Um,
Understood. I
so
get
so so,
that.
so I really try not to use no pun intended, but inflammatory language, in my clinic, but
Oh, head for the hills.
yeah, I'm dying. Yeah, my brain is rotting or something like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
we do see horrible, depressing, sad cases,
Yeah.
but you could talk about neuroinflammation and you'd be talking about it a third of the time with clients that come through your door. So I don't use those words. But
Mhm.
but there is a lot of neuroinflammation, and it's the only reason why you have, cognitive and energetic symptoms when you have the flu. Um, so if you get the flu, you have a lot of cytokines, in your body, and the
Mhm.
vagal nerve forces the brain to match that level of inflammation not because you need that inflammation to restrict, fluids in your brain, but it just simply what they think that it serves the purpose of just making you exhausted so that you go lay down so that your body can heal. And so we're very complicated beings. Like that's quite a move. Geez, the vagal nerve is
Right.
making us feel mentally sick so that we actually take care of the body. So there's some
Yeah.
integration between the body and the brain.
Yeah. I think I'm
It's a
back in my
fascinating move.
anatomy class back in the
Mhm.
day. You know, the
Yeah,
vagal nerve.
yeah,
Going
right.
all the way down.
Yeah. So there's a lot we can do to reduce inflammation in the body, and that's also going to affect the brain. But the main thing is sleep. We have these special little cells called microglial, and they don't convert from their M1, which is a pro-inflammatory state, to their M2, which is their anti-inflammatory state, unless you are getting deep sleep. And deep sleep is something that can be quite fragile for certain sleep disorders. Also, if your brain gets unstable, which again, you can be genetically prone to, like I am, migraines
hmm
and
hmm
panic attacks and potentially asthma and 100 things that can also then rob you of your deep sleep or reduce it. And so we have to be thinking about like sleep as king. And in neurofeedback research, because I spend a lot of time in a lot of different communities, and one of them is the neurofeedback research communities. And if you're at these conferences and someone says, well, something like, hey, has been that type of neurofeedback, has it been shown to help? And they'll yell out some random disorder, and then some other researcher from the back will yell out, well, it helps sleep, so yeah. But the joke is that like if you can improve sleep,
You're there.
you will improve anything to a degree. It won't cure everything, obviously.
Yeah.
It won't be a primary best treatment for everything, but you will improve probably most things, if not everything.
Yeah.
Sleep is a critical part of our body and brain's maintenance system. And so things that enhance that, deepen it, improve it, and protect it are really important.
Yes. Yes, definitely so.
And then we could talk about hyperbaric oxygen therapy and all kinds of other stuff too, because there's a lot of ways. Red light, infrared
Hey,
therapy. We can go on and on.
this is your platform, my
Mhm.
good sir, until I say, well, I got to go get some sleep.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know what your listeners are like. So forgive me, but I can get quite technical about the exciting things that you can do with
We're going to
hyperbaric
roll with it
oxygen.
because
Yeah.
after the
hmm
podcast is done,
hmm
then what I try to do, and I'll work with you on it and get
hmm
your approval, is give the
Sure.
breadcrumbs,
Oh
so
sure.
that
Yeah.
we can say, okay, well, Joshua's talking about this. Here's some background
hmm
for that.
Yeah.
See if we can find, something that I can understand.
Yeah. Well, you probably if you went through the Angel and the Assassin and you weren't completely overwhelmed the whole time, you probably are doing pretty good. I don't know very many people that could read that and feel like okay, I can kind of wrap my head around this.
Well,
Mhm,
with my background in
mhm.
biology and the work that
Yeah.
I've done,
hmm
most recently, I mean, I've done
hmm
my journey in hypnosis,
Yeah.
NLP, guided imagery with Belruth Napperstack. By the way, I
hmm
have to always plug her. She is retired now,
hmm
but she's my sweetheart. She's
hmm
amazing. I had two great experiences, Joshua. I got to see Belruth Napperstack, who's, her voice and her imagery is amazing.
hmm
And I got to see her at a conference in South Lake Tahoe in 2003, and a friend of mine was there, and it was around my birthday, and she went up to Belruth and, could you
hmm
just say happy birthday to Craig? Belruth, well, I don't do this. But for whatever reason, she did. And I was so touched by it. I had tears in my eyes. I'm a
hmm
very emotional guy. And
Yeah.
she came up and she gave me a kiss on my right cheek.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to wash that cheek. And then years later, I went to Dr. Jeffrey Thompson's. I don't know if you know him.
hmm
He's
hmm
into brainwave instrument,
hmm
glorious, beautiful music. And there's no dead wood in this.
Yeah.
It's not the pump, 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 pump. He does
hmm
what's called phase modulation. But I
hmm
took his holistic practitioner certification course,
Right.
and I got what was then known as BioTune there. It was amazing.
Mm.
And his sweetheart, unbeknownst to the world at that time, was Louise Hay. And we had our celebration dinner, and I
Mhm.
got to meet her. And I'm going to put this in the breadcrumbs article,
Sure.
the picture I have with her. Unfortunately, they didn't catch or kiss me on the left cheek. So I'm known, instead of the uncarved block, Joshua, I'm the unwashed face. Because I don't want to I want that to
Yeah.
stay there. So,
Yeah.
anyway, and I'm sorry to take up
Love
your
it.
time.
No, you're
but
good. You're good.
But, I've had that journey so that,
Yeah.
something like The Angel and Assassin, while,
Mm-hmm.
there's some tough points in it. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite get that. I
Sure.
get the high level gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very helpful to me.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's great to have you here
yeah.
to help,
Thank you.
help me better
Yeah.
understand it.
Well, I like to triage my cases with a lot of different types of assessments. And one being the more lesser common one used is the quantitative electroencephalography, which is basically brain waves that are quantified. And I share, to much people's surprise, I share a lot of criticism of its use, and I still use it. And the criticism, it's a very tough tool to use correctly because there's a lot of opportunity to use it incorrectly.
Yeah.
And it's not obvious that, like, when have we reached a point of understanding of brainwaves that we can use it for assessments in mental health? And I think we're there-ish, but I do think that I wonder if I should censor myself, but it's something like
No,
most
don't
clinics
censor
might
yourself
not be
here.
actually there. Most clinics might be, I would say, my genuine feeling is that most clinics are not using it in ways that are, one, reaching its real capacity. I mean, maybe I'm not, but the capacity that it actually could meet and should meet at this level in time. And then two, the accuracy with the way most clinics use it breaks my heart, to be honest. And this week is no exception, but I regularly see reports from other clinics come in, and I'm just looking through them going, there's no way what they're treating is based on anything in reality.
Oh boy.
This is they're seeing things that aren't here. They're reading into things that aren't real and basing protocols off of those things. And maybe you can make an argument that has a biofeedback effect, and maybe that plays into part of why people are still getting better, or maybe the brain responds mostly to a perturbation mechanism, which you stir it up, it'll reorder itself. And most of neurofeedback is probably just a perturbation therapy. We're just pushing down on a water bed and it's rocking around and getting itself ordered again. And I think that's why it's so forgiving, but I think that's a little arrogant and presumptuous, and I'd rather try. And I believe strongly that we're getting better results. Thinking about it carefully.
Can I interject you real quick? Because
please go ahead.
In 2010, in my journey to help my daughter, and I don't want to go too much into the story, but she's had a really rough life, and so one day she came to me, and all the things we were trying, and she was late diagnosed on the spectrum prior to her 21st birthday. So meaningful early intervention other than what I could cobble together and spend thousands and thousands of dollars trying to figure things out. Well, she said to me, I feel like a guinea pig. And I made a promise to her that I would, and this is a repeat of the podcast, but I would never ask her to do anything that she wouldn't consider that I wouldn't do myself. So we went through, and you may know that they're Alan Bacher calls them long timers. Claudia Hansen and Dan Jorgensen. Now they're retired. They've been retired. But we went to get her feedback. And we both did our QEEGs. And guess who signed my QEEG? Jay Gunkelman.
I saw him today, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you see him again, tell him that I've never met him, but I do thank him, And so, I mean, it was a thorough analysis of it by the best in the business. Okay.
We need to figure out how to make that the standard for the way that I'm using it. We need to figure out how to make that the standard. I do believe we can get there.
Yeah. So, high beta spindles at the top of the head, so a guy who's got some, some issues with trauma and whatnot. And I did some more training.
Yeah.
And it was too task oriented for me, and I was too, I want to get this right, and why is the movie player not, we're outward. But when Dan hooked me up with alpha theta training after 30 sessions of SMR, man, that was it for me. I love that. and being able to take 3 notes to a chord and that uplifting feeling that I had. And Dan was so cool because he let me patch in my recorder.
Yeah.
And so I was able to take that with me, and then Audacity, okay, I want just the high stuff, baby. So I edited it. But I love that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I didn't know who Jake Unkelman was at the time, but in my years of delving in this realm, I was like, okay, you got the very best analysis you could get.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there claiming to be the best, but I mean, I'm biased and have a strong opinion that Jay, in terms of basic QEEG interpretation, I believe he's the best. And I believe that his phenotype model and the triple network theory can be married really, really beautifully. And it can help make things make sense and make it simple enough for you to sort them into like a dozen groups. You're like, so now we can go, okay, well, what works for this group? And sure enough, you can look at Ron Swansina's research. And then also, was it Martijn Arns or Dirk de Ritter, the ADHD study? I think that was Martijn Arns. But you can find essentially very reliable treatment outcomes, like 85% versus whatever the pharmaceutical model is for different disorders. You can find great treatment paths with much higher success rate when you think of people in these phenotype models.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, branches of neurofeedback, and there's other therapies of neuromodulation. There's, drug classes, which I don't comment on to my clients, but I'm willing to get on the phone with their doctor and talk to their doctor. Doctors love talking about that stuff as long as you're doing it with them directly. They love that stuff. And again, it's not 100%, but people are complicated, but you get phenomenally high success rates compared to just the symptom-based guessing. People just aren't what they look like sometimes, especially the ones who suffered through 10 doctors and 10 therapists. Their brain does not look the way you think it's going to look. Because if it did, they would have been helped by the other people who were looking at them and grouping them according to their symptoms. You think about this, like the diagnostic model in mental health is nowhere near the same as it is in medicine, and no one talks about this. It's a big concern of mine. If you go to the doctor and you have a rash, they're not going to diagnose you with rash. They're going to diagnose you with whatever you have that's causing the rash. And there's going to be like one of 30 things, right? It could be cancer, it could be an infection, it could be an autoimmune issue, it could be on and on and on. But if you go to a mental health specialist or psychologist and you have anxiety, what are they going to diagnose you with? Anxiety. Doesn't mean anything. Or depression. Okay, well, why? Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't tell you anything about how you got it. Doesn't tell you anything about how to fix it. It's descriptive. It's not prescriptive. And I don't think that people in the industry who are specializing in this have even thought through that.
Can I tell you a aside real quick?
Go for it.
And this is a personal aside. I'm trying to get my daughter on straight Medi-Cal here in California because the managed care that she has is worthless. Everywhere I take it, and she was a victim of a hit-and-run injury and, severe injuries, physical injuries and trauma. And so I have two different surgeons. I have a surgeon at UC Davis who fixed her hip, completely broken ilium, and 7 pins in a plate. She's got foot drop associated with the accident, not the surgery, because he hit her so hard. And then she had a nasty wound rash that another surgeon in a different facility is taking care of, and she's aging out on insurance. So I've got to get the right insurance for her. And so, you got to go through these hoops, these bureaucratic hoops. You talk about the military, the government of all time. And so I'm, fortunately, she's got a fantastic nurse practitioner who we see more than the doctor. And she has tremendous rapport with her. So I shot her off the forms and the background information, to say, hey, here's the reason for the exemption that doesn't necessarily fit in the government's cookie cutter thing, and we're talking about years of misdiagnoses and a person on the autism spectrum. I got her finally to Lawrence Fung, the clinical director at Stanford's Adult Neurology Center. Okay, the very best in the world as far as.
Wow.
And he told me, complex case, but definitely autism. And definitely some of the things that are going on with her are stereotypical autism, not harm, OCD, and the cacophony of mental health diagnoses.
Right.
And this poor kid has been 51 here in California. That's the take in handcuffs to the hospital.
Wow.
Over 25 times.
Mm-hmm.
Converted into a 52 to a psychiatric hold. Cacophony of diagnoses outside of autism, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens with her is she has a meltdown. It's very ferocious. It's very intense. But it's done as soon as law enforcement arrives. So then they take her to the 5150 to, and then they send her off somewhere else. And she's the model patient there because it's over.
Yeah.
And she masks. So
Yeah.
she doesn't want people to think that she's, odd, weird, crazy, whatever. Put the label on it. And so this is the thing that you're talking about in regards to mental health. Exactly. Okay, she's suicidal. Well, okay, but let's also look at what's going on with her presentation and the fact that she never got properly diagnosed and helped with early intervention to this point. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox, but I'm in 1,000,000% in alignment with you. It's an agreement and appreciative.
Well,
that you
the
think
mental
that
health
way.
field hasn't arrived.
Yeah.
Like we're not down to the cellular level like we are in medicine. We're talking about these things like we know what we're talking about, and we're using terms that we've conflated from medicine that are actually confusing to not just the clients, but the practitioners. They don't realize that these borrowed terms are nowhere near the same weight as how we use them in medicine. And they're given that weight. It kind of reminds me of like in my state, unless they've changed it, a school psychologist can just have an undergraduate degree. And it's like, oh, well, why do we call them psychologists then? It's
Exactly.
Like, school psychologists. Well, to conflate so that they appear to have more authority in front of the parent. Just like,
yes, I've had that
that's my
experience,
opinion.
by the way. No,
Yeah.
I've had that. You are spot on, because I've had numerous occasions with that type of situation.
Language can be unintentional or intentionally tricky.
Right.
Yeah. And I do worry about that.
Purposefully tricky.
I know. I agree. I know. I try to be not confrontational, but
I don't see you as confrontational. I see you as somebody that offers information in a very brilliant way. And I appreciate that. I always appreciate seeing how you present yourself. And I'm not trying. I don't owe you money, so it's not.
I had to find the world a little bit more blind than the average person, and so I appreciate the things I stumble upon.
Yeah.
And I tend to have found them. I think of it like moving through life a little bit more blind. You have a different perception of sense, and I know that I'm not blind. I'm not trying to compare, but finding your own way and life not ordering itself in a normal developmental path. And I did go to psychologists, and hence all the interesting discussion and dialogue about it. But I remember I was probably like 6 or 5 or no, I remember. Maybe it was the time when I was 7. The doctor had given me, the Piaget's developmental test where they take 2 equal glasses of water and put one in a tall, skinny container and then one in a round, wide one. And the idea is that you observe them putting equal amounts of water, but if you're not past, like I think it's the concrete operational stage, your mind will gravitate towards the tall one and you'll think that's bigger because you can't, you don't have the object permanence in development yet. And they asked me which one had more water, and I said it was the short, round, wide one, which is like not an answer, by the way. Like it's just things didn't, because everything was not developing in the proper order, which is essentially what they would tell my parents, and they didn't expect it to order itself at all, and it does. I had things like no motor tracking, like I couldn't actually follow moving objects with my eyes, which is a problem because things move when you walk, relative to you. So I was blind when I walked. Which prevented me from being able to walk well or walking without injuring.
Right. So I have in a little different way, I have an understanding of that because my daughter has Duane's retraction syndrome.
Oh.
The 6th cranial nerve that innervates the lateral muscles of the eye never properly developed. So one of her eyes just does not track at all. So
Yeah.
we had to do eye patching to make
Yep.
sure that that eye would not go blind.
Yep.
And, but to this day, she can't, she has to move her head
Mm-hmm.
instead of move her eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just ingrained, and there's a lot of, I would say, habits that even into my late adulthood, here I am like still crafting and scoping them, and very few people in my world are fully briefed on that. They'll meet me and they'll think, genuinely positive things about me. But the reality is it's a heavily compensated, imbalanced person.
Yeah. Well, we do in a different way. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I like to think that people have a hard time figuring me out. I'm off-putting to them. Well, I don't eat pudding anymore, right? That's my favorite saying. I'm a little different breed of cat, and I like that now. It took me 61 years to, or most of my 61 years to get to this place where I'm really comfortable with my being slightly different.
Yeah. No, that's
than the
beautiful.
average.
Yeah. Well, and like you can't expect or explain that to someone with any utility at all when they're in this state of chaos.
Yeah.
And it isn't obvious what's useful to them except to praise them for hard work, regardless of the outcome, because effort is the way out. And so you want to reward the thing that will get them as far in life as possible, which is what my parents did on purpose or on accident. I think they did it on purpose. They're smart people,
Yeah.
But I don't know that we always tell people the most useful things, because I think they are aware, and I'm speaking generally about the average, maybe adolescent or younger. They're aware that they're not who they're supposed to be. They're aware that they're not ready. They're aware that they're an imposter when they step into most roles because they've never done it before. That's just what it is. And they're not being fed sometimes the appropriate mantras that actually are useful for them across time. That's a cultural thing. I don't know what to do about that,
Right. I agree. Yeah. So, okay. We're on 40 minutes. I'd like to go a little further if you're okay with that. I'm fascinated by your theology background.
Sure. Yeah.
And would you be willing to kind of give us a little bit of that? Because
sure. Yeah. I became a Christian in high school, and life got a little bit brighter, a little bit clearer. I found a little more energy and a little more optimism, despite the fact that nothing of any phenomenal substantial material, nothing really changed, except maybe an attitude shift. And I spent a few more years in high school before I dropped out. I did finish high school eventually, though.
Obviously,
dropped out.
Yeah.
I dropped out because I had a teacher who told me I was too stupid to go to college, and I was I was obstinate too. So it's quite a dramatic story, and if I told the whole thing. But
and maybe someday over a cup of coffee or whatever, we can have that conversation and share stories of that.
Yeah, I did realize, I think, like a year into being a Christian, that there was just so much complex. It wasn't simple. There was people out there making it religious.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. It wasn't this simple faith that I'd stumbled into. There was this complex, kind of, albeit ugly, system to a degree. And I say that as someone who's worked in a church and who appreciates churches. But there was an ugly side that I was confused and disoriented by, and I wanted to understand that. And so I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do for college. So for some bizarre reason, I have no idea why, but I decided to go get a theology degree. And I went to a school that was an interdenominational college. So it basically just taught everything that people believe.
Nice.
It was very broad on Christian theology specifically, but it was extremely, extremely broad. And you had to defend your position. And the teachers would slam you down and, no, here's why you're not congruent with these texts or whatnot. And it was far more complex than I ever imagined, but in an exciting, interesting way. that
Nice.
was intellectually stimulating and challenging. And it did feel like way too much in the beginning, but I grew into it slowly. And that feeling of feeling small, like you're really, really small in the universe. And you want that feeling to be kind of coupled with the, I am so small, unimaginably small, like you're zooming out into another galaxy, and yet
Right.
there's still meaning. And yet, and you can get that through all kinds of ways, like studying chaos theory. Like you
Hmm.
realize like if anything in life matters, everything matters. And that's just
Yeah.
basic chaos theory, basic.
Hmm.
And so you really don't get to choose between what matters and what doesn't matter because it's all too connected, way too
Right.
connected. And so, finding a little bit of meaning, kind of getting on a microscope and zooming in on it and learning it and feeling small was a feeling that I got from theology. It was a feeling I got from medicine, and it was a feeling I got from studying the brain, and I
Mm.
still get. And then I like having a broader view of how big the universe really is in different
Yes.
ways, and how small we
Hmm.
are, and that it's still meaningful. That
Right.
contradiction feels significant to me. It's a good feeling for some reason.
Very cool. Very
I
cool.
regularly give lectures on spiritual, emotional, and physical integration because I have experience in, Christian theology, healthcare, and also mental health care now. And so I regularly give talks on on the connections between all three. And there's phenomenal research tying all three together, that they are just as connected through chaos theory as anything is. That you can't
Fascinating.
separate the spiritual from the mental, you can't separate the spiritual from the physical. And if you, how do I say this? There's 20,000 publications showing the connection between a spiritual mind, spiritual attention as being essentially as significant as hygiene is to the body.
Hmm.
So it is the gains that you get from being spiritually oriented outweigh any kind of argument for a coping skill to the point where it's not a valid argument. It's not, we're not believing a grateful lie, or what is the phrase they use? I don't remember. But we are pursuing something that better orients us in the world the way believing truth does. And the research outlines this in many, many studies. When I give talks on this, I usually have lots and lots and lots of citations because I'm a research guy.
Yeah. Right.
You know me.
Exactly. Yes, I do.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
appreciate that
mhm,
about you because
yeah.
you don't just come up and talk, you
Mhm.
talk and you show. Okay, well,
Yeah.
here's where I
Well,
got this from.
most of my presentations when I'm teaching at universities or lectures, they're just packed full of citations. Like I believe in backing up what I say, and they're big
Exactly.
studies usually. I'm picking them carefully,
Well,
but
you're
we.
taking a
Mhm,
very complex
mhm,
subject that
mhm,
there's some passion
mhm,
involved,
mhm.
but you're giving that information that demystifies it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
here's what I'm
Well,
saying, and here's where
yes,
I got that from.
yeah. Well, and if we were believing something and it wasn't actually true about us, wouldn't we be less oriented?
Hmm.
And wouldn't we build wrong interventions based on being poorly oriented? And wouldn't those interventions have a lower success rate? And wouldn't our quality of life go down? That would be
Yes.
true about like not being like oriented towards something that's true, but instead being spiritual has a huge impact in our life that's as big as hygiene, like
Right.
huge. So and I'm summarizing like a 4-hour lecture, but the data is there, and I've never heard a good argument against it. Never.
Yeah, and you sent me that link, and I haven't gotten
Oh,
through
okay,
all of it where you're
great. I
talking
didn't know I sent
about
that to
that,
you. That's
but
great. I forgot.
you did send that to me, and that's going to
Hmm.
be in the breadcrumbs. I'm going to
Sure.
make sure that gets in
Hmm.
there, and just really fascinating stuff. And
Hmm.
I appreciate you talking about that. Shifting gears a little bit,
Sure.
you have a
Please.
book out. I want to make sure we
Awesome.
give a plug for your book,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, I decided to write a book for well, it was more of like a long informed consent that I decided to turn into like with pictures. And then it became like a 30-page book, and then a 50-page book. And then eventually it was like, you know what, let's just make a book for my clients because it's cheaper than these spiral bound things.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Joy Lunt who was like, you know what, you could just like give this to everybody else. And I'm going to work on a second edition which is going
Oh,
to try to
cool.
integrate the aspects of QEEG that I think are very, very useful, that, kind of calling up the rest of the community, hopefully.
Yeah. And by the way, folks, I have a copy of this book. I have read this book, and I really recommend this book for that introductory, exposure to Joshua and neurofeedback, and it's
And
great.
I'm not aware of any book that you can read that actually goes over the technical stuff
You're right.
that the person can read without like a year of training.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a very complex book, and there's lots and lots of pictures, but that's because it's designed to be easy to read. I would also add that, because of our connection of NeuroOptimal, I did one case study in there that I put in there as case example.
I saw that.
Yeah, that
I was very appreciative of that.
Using
Very
NeuroOptimal.
cool.
And I have a few more that are going to go into the next book. And part of it was I was thinking through this, like if I put this out there, I'm thinking about this group's going to be offended by this part, this kind of group's going to be offended by this part. And I thought, if I could just get all the groups,
Yeah, exactly. And if I may, I'm not plugging that at all, but I want to demystify it. I want people to, and in a way that allows them to come back and say, I don't agree with what you just said, or where did you come up with that? And, and that's fine. Let's have that collegial dialogue.
Any group of people will be offended by at least one part of my book. Almost guarantee it. And I
wasn't offended at all.
I wanted
Bring 'em on.
Well, I mean, that's very impressive of you, Craig. I maybe it wasn't individuals, but obviously there's maybe groups of individuals. And so I didn't want to leave anybody out. I wanted to not hold any alliances. And there is a little bit of everything in there that's almost designed to ensure that I'm not aligning with any group. And I don't want to align with any group. I want to just pursue.
But it's thought-provoking. It gives the opportunity for people to see, okay, well, I didn't think of that in that way. Oh, okay, well, here's some information. And I think that's fantastic the way you present it.
Yeah. Well, and there's lots of things out there that are helping people. And I can't afford to be closed off to any of them. And I wouldn't want anybody that I am collaborating with to close themselves off to things that would be
anyone
useful.
And anything out there that is trying to help relieve human suffering, I'm all for.
Do we have
may not understand it. I may not understand it. I may not agree in going in that direction, but more power to you. I mean, my ideas have evolved over time in what I believed, what I understood, what I thought I understood. And then, oh, wait a minute, this is a little different now. And I've shifted, but I still love the stuff that got me to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that where I've been wrong in my life has not been in what I excluded. It's not been in what I included. It's been in what I excluded. And that's overwhelmingly evident to me that I've been wrong 10 times more often in what I excluded than what I included. So the things that I said, yes, I'm going to accept this, I was less likely to be wrong there than the things that I was saying, that's not real, that's not a thing, that's not really helping people. That's where I keep finding myself with my foot in my mouth. And so I'm trying, now I'm approaching 40 here shortly, I'm trying much harder.
You're just a young guy.
No, I know, but I'm trying to learn as early as I can to stop and watch carefully. Before I judge. Because,
Fantastic stuff. I mean, I really, really, really appreciate it. I'm getting to the place where I need to nod off. But this has been amazing. And I'm so glad, so appreciative of you to come on the show with me. And I've had an amazing time. If it's just you, me, and the fence post, it's a magnificent experience. And we're going to be ending up here, and I need you to stay in the studio as we close so that your local files can upload. And I would like to continue this,
anytime, by the way.
I mean, because it's a great way to see you and hear your voice and really enjoy the experience of your wealth of knowledge and your your journey, things I did not know,
And
that I'm
I would
blessed and
say
thrilled.
I speak often. Like this isn't even my first podcast in the last couple of days. Like I've had
Hmm.
many. But this is the first time I've talked about my childhood. Just so you know that.
Wow.
Which I'm fine with. But
I
maybe nobody asked.
I I'm so grateful, and I want to continue this dialogue and learn as much as I possibly can. And I consider you a friend. I want to build on this friendship and just enjoy every moment. So with that, thank you very much for everything. We're going to go to our outro. We'll see how well that'll go. Whether I need to edit it or not, we'll find out. And then we'll get to the after this, we'll do the breadcrumbs, and I want you to take a look at that and give a thumbs up or change this or whatever, because this is all for you.
Sure.
All right, my friend, here comes the outro.
Thank you.
Wow, now that was an amazing podcast. Thank you, Joshua, for the lessons in your nonlinear dynamical journey. Truly wonderful. All right, folks, that's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please join us again very soon on All Things Nonlinear Dynamical. Talks about the brain and human connection. Until next time, cheers and be well.
And be well, and stay in the studio as I stop the recording. I'll let you know.
Absolutely.
We can cut loose. Thank you again, Josh.